Hello and welcome to our webinar on planning for CRM success. My name is Melissa Green. I'm a managing consultant and senior business analyst with LedgeView. I've been on the LedgeView team for about 4 years, but prior to joining LedgeView, I worked in a different capacity on software and CRM implementations for over 10 years. I've seen good and not so good projects, and really the reflection of what those characteristics are of what made projects successful or not feeds much of the content that we'll be delivering in this presentation today.
All right, thanks, Melissa. My name is Jody Gilroy, and I am a senior business analyst with LedgeView Partners. Prior to joining LedgeView, I spent many years working in the marketing field, but it so happened that I worked for a company that wanted to implement a CRM system, and I had the opportunity to be that project manager. So, certainly offer perspective as a consultant for LedgeView, but also as a project manager on the business side, implementing CRM and talking about best practices today. All right.
Okay, so session objectives. We really hope that we are going to educate you with tips to set you up for success in your CRM deployment or upgrade. So a lot of these tips that we're talking about, are universal and can be used for, a brand new launch of a CRM platform, having come from no CRM platform, a major upgrade to an existing deployment, an additional phase, added on functionality, or certainly just relaunching a stale, a stale deployment. But really, we want to provide you with an understanding of what the project stages are and the role that each of these stages plays in a successful project, and really get you to start thinking about actions that you can take immediately to avoid, some project failures and realize your ROI. And we want to emphasize the importance of 4 key characteristics of a successful project. It was, just thinking about what makes projects successful. It's hard to pinpoint just one thing, but over and over, these 4 elements kept coming up, and so a lot of our content is, around leadership involvement, planning, user adoption, and communication. So, once again, just getting you to start thinking and have some good information with which you can take action on and apply right away. All right, so 3 key project stages listed here are analysis, design, and implementation. As we progress through the content in this presentation, we're going to be kind of bucketing our tips and best practices into these 3 categories. Certainly, it was hard to whittle down the content. Each one of these stages could be its own hour-long or more presentation in itself. So certainly we're not, the intent isn't to cover the analysis, design, and implementation from every angle, but really to just point out and highlight, a couple of key pieces from each. And once again, as you'll see here, leadership involvement, user adoption, communication, and really all of this involves planning, should be present, in each of these. So in analysis, we're going to cover selecting your project team, defining your current processes, doing a technology assessment, defining your future state, and then establishing a roadmap and a budget. So really the analysis is where your vision is defined. You're articulating why your company is going to invest in a CRM platform. And really, you're starting to get buy-in and sponsorship within your organization. And then design, is more detailed planning, for the first phase of what you've defined in your roadmap. And that's really defining how and exactly what you're going to set up in the system. And then the implementation is obviously, building out that functionality, configuring the system, migrating your data, in launching the system out to the users. Common mistakes we see are people wanting to jump right to implementation, just have some brief discussions on what you want to do and why you want to do it. But, certainly I've never worked on a project where that approach has worked. So with that, let's jump in then to our first tip in the analysis stage. Jody, are you on mute?
Oh, yes. Yes, I am on mute. So
Hey.
let's jump back here and take a look at the project team. So like I said, any good project first and foremost starts with a good project team. So let's review what makes up a good project team. And I think right here is, making and selecting a strong team is really core. And you got to remember as you're doing that what the purpose of the team is. So the purpose of your CRM project team is really to foster buy-in from the top down. And this next point is really important. When you're picking members for your team, make sure that they represent all applicable areas of your company. So you don't want to have just an IT heavy project team because it's a software system or a business application. You want to have representatives from sales, marketing, technical service, operations, depending on what the impact of the CRM project will be. You want to have that cross-representation. And really that team and those people are brought aboard to facilitate and understand and share what the requirements of what this system should look like for the organization. And they become, as part of that, they really are the owners of this project to ensure the success. Now, those team members will serve different purposes at various points of the project, but typically you're going to see them involved in this analysis stage and then moving into design and requirements gathering, the testing of the system, and then that final rollout and post go live support as well. Now, a common question we get asked a lot of times is, what is the ideal number for my team? How many people should I have? And while there is no exactly magic number, it really is dependent on the size of the scope of the project that you're working on, and also the scope of the size of your organization in general. That will help to dictate that. So we're going to take a look here in just a minute on a couple of potential structures, but let's first talk about the roles that team members could play. So overall, you typically have, like an overall steering committee that can be very applicable in large scale projects. And then even on small or large projects, you typically have a executive sponsor. So this is the person that is at the helm of the project. Maybe it's not the day-to-day person that we're interacting with as we're designing the system or analyzing the system or implementing the system, but somebody that has kind of that executive control over the project. So that is typically, a C-level executive or business owner in most cases. Then the next person or persons you would have on your project team is that team captain or the owner of the project. So they are going to be the true project manager on the business side and really the champion of the project. And they typically will report up to that executive sponsor. And then from there, to get that diversification across divisions, you're going to have your subject matter experts, again, from sales and operations or marketing or technical service, customer service, depending on what your project scope is. And again, you want team members from multiple divisions to offer perspective. Even if you're maybe talking about technical service and you'll have your core team members on there, you may want to bring in your sales team or members from your marketing team if they potentially have some input or usage of that part of the system. And then of course, IT will play a role in your projects as well. So let's look next at a sample project team. Again, depending on the size of your organization and the size of your project, this will vary. But this was an example of a recent project I worked on and kind of what their overall structure was. So at the top, we had the overall project sponsors. And then we had a business project lead. Again, that's kind of your team captain from the business side. And then you're going to have your IT project lead. Again, those two people are your champions or your project managers, or they're really the go-to people as consultants that we work with on a day-to-day basis. Underneath the business project lead, so depending on what division or what business unit is impacted by the CRM project, we recommend that you appoint a lead for that area. So if it's a sales area, appoint a lead person for sales, a lead person for marketing, a lead person for technical service. And then underneath them is those subject matter experts. So depending on what the conversation is and the analysis or the design and the implementation, we're going to pull in those resources to get that diverse perspective on the day-to-day of their operations.
Yeah, and oftentimes these are, actual users of the system.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, you're right, Melissa, and I think that's an excellent point. These are the people that will be using your system. So if you involve them from the ground up on a project, you're going to see much better user adoption. That really goes back to one of those 4 points that Melissa brought up at the beginning. Now, on the IT side too, I mean, this is a business application system that will need to be supported within your organization. IT plays a role in that. While they may not be the user of the system day in and day out, they're going to help support integrations, upgrades, etc. They should be part of that conversation as well.
Yeah, and one other thing to point out here is notice that the majority of the team members are on the business side. You know, a common mistake that we've seen made over the years in projects is that IT is leading the project or has more involvement in it than the business side does. You know, and when you really think about it, you know, IT is crucial to a project's success. However, the needs and the business requirements and what the business processes are and who's using it, that really needs to be, you know, owned and run by the business and not IT.
Absolutely. So let's take a look at a smaller project team. So again, maybe a smaller organization or even just a small project. This could be a small project within a large organization. We see that structure really compact, and that is okay because there's not as much decision making, there's not as much scope involved here. So, but typical, you still want that representation from your business side as well as your IT side. But again, a little heavier on the business than the IT involvement. And you also, your project sponsor on a small project may have a little bit more day-to-day, especially if they're like the business owner of the organization. So mention that as well. So, you know, common project pitfalls. You know, we touched upon these a little bit, but let's talk about them one more time. So, you know, what's the ideal project size? Again, we don't have that magic number, but we will caution that, you know, putting a team that is too small together or too isolated to one business unit is a pitfall in a project because you're not getting that diversification or that input from the day-to-day user into the decision-making of the system you're building, and that will lead to lower user adoption. Now, on the flip side, a project with too many team members, now you have too many decision makers, and it's hard to schedule meetings, and there's lots of reasons for the complexity if you have too large of a project team that really sometimes nothing gets done. So you want to keep, you know, find that balance, find the right fit for your project. So you can always, you know, add team members. It's probably a little harder to take them away later on in a project. So just something to keep in mind. Now, too IT heavy, Melissa hit upon that on our slides, and it's a perfect example. This is a business application system. While IT will probably support it, the business user will use it. So you really want to get that input to increase your overall user adoption. Now, this is another piece that we have seen on projects, and it definitely can be a pitfall, is that executive sponsor, that top level individual is really micromanaging the project. Like maybe they have a vision in their head, or maybe because this is a huge investment, potentially a big investment for the organization, they feel like they really have to have their hands in it. And that can create some resistance around the other team members, maybe for sharing just due to their position. And again, you're not getting the true input that you need. So the best way that we found to kind of get maybe over that hurdle a little bit and rein that in is to have those really strong teams, team captains from both your IT and your business side that is informing and educating the executive sponsor on the progress of the project to keep them informed without impacting the overall team. Another pitfall too is as you're kind of going through that selection process of team members, we all know we have resource constraints, but picking individuals that will add value, number one, but also have the time or will make the time for this project. So having involvement in meetings, reviewing documentation, talking with team members, etc. So that's a key component as well in the profile of a good team member. And then you want to maintain consistency of the project team over time. So as we move from analysis to design to implementation, while you may have some team members that will be more heavily involved in certain phases than others, you try to want to maintain that consistency, and especially at your kind of team captain or project lead level from one stage to another, because decisions are made in one phase that impact the next phase, and it's good to have that historical reference over time.
Yeah, and we've seen projects before where if project team members come and go too quickly or aren't consistent to some degree throughout the project, business requirements can drastically change, which in the end can cause larger scope, rework, and ultimately cost your company more money. So consistency among that project team really helps to ensure success throughout the whole journey.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's look at this next piece, which is process definition. This is another critical area of project success, is really defining the business processes within your organization. It's very easy to start focusing on technology right away. I mean, this is a CRM project, it's about technology, let's just jump right in. However, at this stage, we really caution you, especially in analysis, is don't focus on technology. You should be first defining your process, your business need, and then the technology will follow behind that. So let's take a closer look. So one of the first things you're going to want to do is really start out by defining your process. So how do I do that? Well, we recommend beginning with documenting your current state. In doing that, you want to interview your team members, find out what the day in the life of that person or team is. You'll document their key processes that could be impacted by the CRM implementation. So for example, take a look at your sales process and define the steps that it takes to bring a lead into your organization, track that lead, and turn it into an opportunity and eventually close that opportunity or win that sale for the organization. We highly recommend going through that for kind of the key areas that you anticipate being managed in the CRM system. And we would recommend actually laying out these processes on a map as part of your documentation process. And this will really help you to start to identify shortfalls and really identify opportunities to change prior to the CRM implementation if that's needed. So while you're completing this exercise, you'll want to focus on uncovering obstacles and inefficiencies in your process. And you can do this by keeping these questions on the top of your mind. And I'll just read a couple. But I think the key here is a CRM project gives you a great opportunity to really maybe evaluate the business. I think a lot of times as business or processes, as users of systems or as you're in a role, you kind of over time just adopt and you're like, okay, this is the way we've done it. This is the way we always do it. That's our process. But this is a good time to take that step back, reflect and say, is this a good process? Is everyone following the same process? Because as you look to bring that into your CRM, if it's not, and a lot of people are doing lots of different things, you're going to run into some roadblocks, one in user adoption, and then trying to standardize process. Identify what's taking too much time. When you ask people, as a day in the life of, find out, what are they complaining about? It's okay, take that negative feedback and really analyze it and determine what might be the root of that complaint. What processes really don't add value to the organization, are inefficient, are complex, which ones just really don't make sense, and also which ones are extremely important and crucial to the organization so that you can continue to move forward with those. You want to document those business requirements too, because as you're asking yourselves these questions, it's going to flush out and you're going to say, okay, well, this is a requirement. We have to have the system do X, Y, or Z because this is important for this process. So you'll uncover those opportunities and you'll also start to see where the CRM can leverage those processes as you build out the system. So now that we've got our process defined, you'll also, this is where we're going to start talking about technology a little bit, but this is more about an upfront inventory of the technology that you're using as an organization today outside of the CRM. So to complete this assessment, you'll want to do the following, is really identify the systems that are currently being used today by the individuals within your organization. So what is sales using as technology platforms? Are they using Outlook? Are they, where are they storing their files? How are they communicating and storing their contacts? I mean, the list could go on and on. You'll want to do the same thing for marketing and sales and customer service, technical service, whatever department, business unit, again, that's applicable to the project. And then kind of document too as you're investigating this is what are the users using the system for? Because a lot of times you'll find that this bigger system might be using for a very small component that potentially could be done in the CRM system or maybe in a more efficient or less expensive system to get the output that you're looking for. So this is a good exercise to do as well. Another thing that we're looking for when you do a technology assessment is understanding what systems that you are currently operating with that potentially we may want to integrate with your CRM system. So ERP systems are a very common platform that we integrate with the ERP to the CRM. So ERPs typically hold a lot of order data, inventory data, sales transaction data that may want to come back and be surfaced back into the CRM to an account level, a contact level. So sales person could go ahead and open that record and view that data. They don't necessarily need to have access to the ERP, but they may want just to have that data set viewable to them. So that's an example. There's many others as well outside of ERPs that make sense to integrate as well. This process will also help you identify opportunities for improvement or consolidation of services. And what we recommend is just creating a current state technology map so you can kind of start to see what that looks like. And the next slide here gives you an example. Visually putting this down on paper can be actually very eye-opening to organizations. This isn't an exercise necessarily that you always go through. So when you start to see all the different technologies that are being used by all the different departments and maybe where they are connected, where they're disconnected, where there's repetition in the way that individuals are storing in one system versus another, it really starts to give you the vision of where you can improve going forward. So here, for example, we have a lot of manual data entry happening between systems. We have a lot of just disconnected and independent systems that are being operated, like the quoting tool or the reporting data or the territory mapping tool, whatever it might be. They're all just kind of living in silos within the organization. So Melissa is going to speak a little bit later about what this future state technology map will look like and the advantages of building that out as well. All right, so one of the final points before I turn it over to Melissa here is when you're doing an analysis, I think this is just really important to have this CRM a reality check. Well, let's talk about the points of that. But if your company has implemented a CRM in the past, you need to have a reality check to ask yourself, why was the past CRM implementation unsuccessful? And really take the time to document and understand the past to avoid a repeat of this same process in the future, right? In addition to that, you're going to hire individuals and people are going to come into your organization that maybe have used CRM in the past. And there's going to be perceptions around CRM. And some people may have not had the best experience. Other people may have had a very positive experience. So it's important to gather feedback from individuals that have that information or have those experiences to share because it'll help you, again, at user adoption level, and also maybe even you'll learn a few things of how not to design or things to put in and things to watch for as you're building out your CRM going forward.
All right, so the next topic that we want to cover as part of the analysis stage, nearing the end of the analysis stage here, is future state definition. So just like Jody talked about defining what your current state is and really getting an understanding of that, we want to do the same for future state. And a lot of times people don't necessarily want to take the time to document or talk about their current state and just jump right to future state. But almost every, I shouldn't say almost every, I think every project where we've sat down and worked with our customers on defining that current state, there were assumptions that were being made about the current state that weren't necessarily true, or when your project team is collaborating, everybody's learning something. They're like, oh, I didn't know you guys did it that way, or why are we doing it that way? So there's always some good value that comes out in defining current state. So don't necessarily just jump right to future state because we want to look at the gap between current and future state. as well as part of this. So really when you get to the future state definition portion, this is really defining the what and the why. So what are our future goals? What is that gap that we currently have in reaching those goals? And what is the role that the CRM solution is going to fill? What gaps is the CRM solution going to fill? And then, what does the future technology map look like? I often say, try to make it visual. If you can't draw it, you don't understand the concept or you don't have the full picture. So on the next slide here, we'll kind of take what Jody had done in the current state mapping, and we'll look at it and how it's morphed into the future state. But really, that future state definition is defining why. Why are you implementing or upgrading or enhancing CRM? What are your business drivers? Are you doing this to consolidate systems? You just have, over the years, you kind of patchworked, quilt different systems together. They're disparate. It's kind of grown out of control, and too many manual processes. Did you experience recent growth, or are you planning some pretty quick growth? Is your market changing? Have you acquired a company? Do you have new leadership involved? Are there new business priorities or new initiatives? Do you feel like you just don't have good information, good insight, and good analytics? You feel like maybe you have a lot of data, but you have not been able to turn that data into information and insight with which you can take action. Do you just need to standardize your processes? So we could go on and on with kind of what some business drivers are, but certainly you want to be able to, for your company, understand why. What's your why? And then the collective answers to all of these questions above really is your CRM vision. So future state technology mapping. So here we've taken our current state and modified that to eventually where we want to get to. So as you can see, there's a few less components to the diagram. So we've consolidated some systems in this example. We've minimized the manual, and in this case, eliminated a lot of the manual processes. We've added some integrations, and it's really just a cleaner, more streamlined picture. All right. So one of the last pieces to your analysis stage would be defining your roadmap and also your budget. Definitely you will set yourself up for success when you have, as part of your vision, you have a roadmap. So, certainly you're not going to jump from current state to future state just really, most of the time, really quickly or all in one phase. You want to chunk that out into realistic, doable phases, both taking time of your own resources and budget into consideration, as well as user adoption. Changing and overhauling too much, too drastically, and too quickly, can definitely impact and in a negative way user adoption. So I'm going to talk about budget expectations in a second here too, but a lot of times you need to evaluate what comes first, the budget or the roadmap. In this scenario here, I'm presenting that the roadmap comes first, and then the budget forms itself around what we've defined as the roadmap, but sometimes that's not always feasible in some businesses. Sometimes there is a certain budget that you need to stick within for very valid reasons, and then that needs to be considered a little bit more upfront, and that will help to kind of back you into your roadmap or really dictate your roadmap. It can vary, but identify what really it is for your organization and then plan accordingly. So as I talked about too, we want to have a phased approach. Definitely most CRM projects, and certainly those that are successful, do have multiple phases. So prioritize those phases based on your business needs, and keep the first phase as simple as possible, but certainly still, where there are some realizable gains, both to the company and the users. And then set a realistic project timeline. Actually, before I move into that, one last thing kind of about your roadmap. So your first phase of your roadmap will be defined out in a bit more detail, and then you'll have an idea of what you want to accomplish in phase 2 and phase 3, but it'll be at a little bit more of a higher level, certainly, but you do want to have that long-term roadmap. Don't just plan for the first phase and just kind of leave it there. And then, once that roadmap is defined out, you want to set a realistic project timeline. So, think about factors that could impact your project timeline. Do you have a system that's in your current state diagram that it's retiring? Maybe it's old technology. It doesn't operate on updated operating systems on your devices. Maybe it's a very expensive subscription, and you want to get it replaced, before you have to pay for that renewal. Things like that. Also, considering the availability of your internal resources, realizing that, there will be time that your team needs to put into this project. So are there any, vacation schedules, busy seasons, different things like that that need to be taken into account? And then training. Sometimes if you're training a large number of people, and especially if you're scattered around the globe, if you know that a lot of organizations will have an annual sales meeting, all the expenses of the travel to get everybody there, if you can get an extra day added to that conference or that annual sales meeting to do some CRM training, kind of take advantage of that, and definitely will save a lot of money and help in user adoption as well. And then along the lines of the timeline here, have patience. Don't be too aggressive unless there's a valid business reason to do so. You don't want to get to this point, in your planning and then, really feel rushed. That will definitely compromise, the quality and the success, and potentially leave out, some key pieces to a project. Okay, so now let's move into budget expectations. So certainly you want to have a budget, because projects can be impacted if there isn't a realistic budget set up front. Certainly that could become a hurdle, and you might have to cut scope out, or the project may not happen at all. So certainly planning as early as possible from a budgeting perspective will help to ensure success in your project and keep things moving. So typical cost considerations associated with what we're calling here as a CRM journey, it's not just the licensing and maybe some training costs. It's really the analysis. So, taking the time to work with a consultant such as LedgeView to help you through that analysis and help you do some of that documentation. And if you're not going to, work with an outside party, a consultant, you certainly, need to budget for your own internal time to do that. Same thing with the design. A lot of times we will do separate engagements or statements of work with our customers for the analysis portion, the design portion, and then, of course, the implementation, so the actual build and rollout of the system. You also want to plan for future upgrades. So maybe set yourself a 3-year or a 5-year budget. Don't just plan for the first phase. Try to put some budgetary estimate numbers to the future phases, so that when it's time to move from phase 1 to phase 2, that you don't have to experience a hurdle and then delay things because you're having to go through the internal approvals for the capital. So and then certainly support costs. Think about how you're going to support the platform going forward and what those costs might be. And then also the licensing costs. Is it annual costs, monthly reoccurring costs for both the main core CRM platform as well as any third-party products? And then, like I said, do the same. Try to put some high-level number to the phase 2 so that things can keep moving. So set a realistic budget for both the first and the future phases of CRM. Okay, so that wraps up the first project stage, which was analysis, and now we're moving into the second one, which is design. So we spent quite a bit of time talking through the content and analysis, and that is because really the better the planning that you do up front, the more efficient and the better that the future stages will happen. So really it is stressing how important that analysis piece is up front. And really this design just builds upon the findings and the work that you've done in analysis. Design you get into more detail and you fine tune and just build upon what you've what you've done in the analysis. So system design, functionality. So again, this topic could be, you know, its own couple-hour session, but you really just want to detail out your requirements and get a little bit more granular than you did when you were in the analysis stage. This is where, you know, you're going to identify customizations, coding, what customization and potentially custom coding is needed to accommodate your business processes, identifying any workflows that need to be set up, you know, screen layouts, fields, things like that. And then really talking about your reporting and your dashboarding needs. A lot of times this is something that should be discussed early on in the design, because it does dictate then how the system is set up, what data is collected, and how that data is collected. So, you know, talking about reporting and dashboard needs and analytic needs up front in the design is very, I guess, a wise choice and will lead to a successful project. And then certainly develop data migration and integration mappings. We'll talk a little bit more about this here in a future slide. Define your security requirements and establish your testing and training plan. A lot of times testing and training is overlooked at this point in a project and is saved until right before you do the testing or right before you do the training. But you want to put together a plan. You know, you may not have every last detail, but at least a structure and a sketch of a plan for what that's going to look like, because it makes it a lot easier when you get to that point in the project. Okay, and then design documentation. You want to document what it is that you're going to set up and how it's going to be set up. You know, that certainly will serve as your blueprint, you know, moving forward for the entire team, you know, with which you're going to implement from. And you want to make sure you have all of your team members review that documentation and approve it before you go into implementation. You know, it's common that perhaps something got overlooked, or, you know, by the time or from the time you started your design to when you finished it, maybe a business need has changed. So you need to react and capture that appropriately. And then this really just, once again, just properly prepares your team for the implementation. And it also ensures that you're in alignment with your goals. And then after design, revisit that roadmap that you put together in implementation. You know, kind of taking a look if your timeline and your budget are still in alignment. You may need to make a few adjustments, but certainly, you know, do that and then be sure to communicate those adjustments. Another area of the design stage that we wanted to talk about a little bit here is data migration and integration. You really want to have considerable conversation and thought put into what you're going to migrate and what you're going to integrate. Don't just integrate or migrate something just because you can. Really ask yourself, do you need to migrate? And then more importantly, be able to articulate why. Why are we migrating this data into the system? You know, you want to keep your data clean. You want to have it be relevant. But if the effort to clean up the data, to make it credible and usable for the users is maybe not, so it's going to be so difficult, costs so much money, and maybe you're still not sure if it's going to be in a clean state, you know, it's okay to evaluate possibly starting from a clean slate. You know, in some cases that, you know, that is a viable option. You know, but certainly you want to be sure that you're starting off with clean data, credible data in the system, or your user adoption is going to plummet. And then speaking to integration, you know, it must add business value. You know, whether it's to provide data accuracy, better insight, as Jody mentioned, you know, integrating with your ERP system so that salespeople can see more sales transactional or sales data that they currently don't see because they don't log into the ERP system. You know, that certainly adds business value. But being able to understand what that business value is so that you can justify the expense. A lot of times, you know, migration and integration in a project is expensive, you know, so you need to have it make sense. And then adequately plan and discuss your integration and migration needs. does the migration need to be one-way or two-way? Maybe we start in phase one with a one-way integration and then graduate into a two-way integration, between the systems in a phase two. It definitely needs to be well thought out, and you want to make sure that you plan adequate time and resources for thorough validation, and testing. And certainly here too, you don't want to underestimate the effort that this is going to take. If you're contemplating starting a CRM project, you can never start early enough on your data migration and data cleanup planning and discussions, because it oftentimes takes a lot longer than what is initially thought. Okay, so sorry, I'm kind of skipping around on my bullet points here. You want to be involved in the data migration and the integration conversations in the planning. It does get complex. It is confusing, even to those of us that do this for for a living. Different systems present different complexities in the way that data is stored. So it's not black and white. It's not straightforward. But take the time, stay involved in it. If you don't understand something about it, certainly ask questions. Be sure that you do understand, because moving forward, if something is missed or incorrect in the planning of this, it can be a pretty costly mistake to go back and rewire. So spend ample time reviewing and validating, both your approach to data migration and to integration. You certainly don't want to rush this. All right, so now we're going to get into the third project stage, and that is project implementation. So once again, this third stage is just building upon what you've done in design. So if you've done your analysis and your design thoroughly, and taken the time to do that, the implementation portion should be the easiest and most straightforward part of the project. So you want to develop, a realistic project plan, clearly defining the timeline and what needs to be done and who's doing it. You want to have clearly defined roles and task assignments. Certain things need to be done in a certain order, and everybody on that project team needs to be aware of how things are going to be rolling out. Do have regular status meetings with your project team to keep everybody on the same page. Make sure you're making the right decisions if decisions need to be made. And then certainly so that your project team members can communicate out as to the status of the project. And you want to provide periodic brief updates out to the leadership and the users, tailor that content to them, but this will help keep people informed, keep people engaged, lead directly, to user adoption. And you want to stick to your scope and your timeline. So you did all that upfront work in planning for the implementation, putting together the timeline and the budget and what are our needs and what are our processes. You need to be disciplined and be stringent here on sticking to that. Something will come up that would be considered, scope creep. Sometimes it's very valid. You do need to include that, but make sure that you evaluate it thoroughly and get it approved, with your whole project team, and make sure it really is something that you have to do now and it's worth the, the additional scope, cost, and timeline that may be associated with it, and certainly communicate that, with the project team. And then provide adequate people and time for your user acceptance testing prior to go live. I would say that this is something that we see common. Even sometimes if you do plan for your testing, you do have it factored in as part of your realistic timeline. A lot of times at this point in the project, people might be running out of steam a little bit, or the amount of time that should be spent on user acceptance testing, it doesn't always happen. So do your best to plan accordingly and be sure that you're doing that user acceptance testing, because it is very, very powerful in the overall success of the project and user adoption. And then just go ahead and start your training preparation as you've specified in your design. So as you've done your design, you put together your training plan, add additional details that you may need, and then just execute against that plan.
All right, so one of the final things that we're going to look at today is training and communication. Now, this is a critical component in any project and during all project stages. So whether we're talking about analysis, design, or implementation, these are just kind of the things that we've learned over time that are just very important to keep at the forefront of any project. You know, the first piece is really communicating the big picture and business value to both the users, your team members, project team members, etc. You know, as humans, we want to know, right? What's in it for me? We're making this change. Why? How is this going to make my job easier? So you want to clearly define why we're doing this and how will this implementation be good for them as well as the company. It's very important to really define this and communicate this at every stage of the project. Again, this leads to better user adoption going forward. The next piece is involving your team in the planning and process design. I think we hit upon this pretty heavily when we talked about the analysis. But you know, change is hard for many people. But if you involve them in the project as much as you can before go live, it will help them feel more comfortable with the change. Don't be, like I said, the surprises are hard. So don't surprise your team. Involve your team in the design planning and communicate with them regularly on the progress of the project. Show them how it will help the team succeed. So, you know, be their cheerleader. Depending on the size of your project, it will sometimes be hard to maintain the momentum, as Melissa just mentioned. You know, kind of get to that implementation stage. You might have been working on this for a while, and it's like, oh, I'm just kind of done. But, you know, keep that momentum going. Keep them excited throughout the project. And really, those project champions, project team members should be doing that throughout the organization. The next piece is, you know, just make the system easy for your users. Always keep them at the forefront of your design, of your decision making. Again, you want to build a system that they're going to use, so make it easy for them. The next point is to train and retrain your team and users. So, you know, you're going to do an initial training when you launch the project and go live stage, but and you're going to want to do a very hands-on, you know, training. Ideally, they have laptops in front of them or their desktop, whatever it may be, and you're creating that real-world scenario for them to walk through. So it's applicable to them. It's not just this foreign concept that they need to then apply to their jobs. So, you know, have a very solid go live training session, but then after that, remember these systems will evolve over time. You're going to add new processes. You're going to upgrade the system. You're going to add new components. And when you do that, don't forget about the users that are using the system day in and day out. Train them, inform them on those new pieces of the system so that they're aware. Some of the ideas around that is, you know, you can certainly hold online like refresher training sessions, do lunch and learns around the CRM system. Get involved also outside of just your core project. Get involved in some outside organization like the CRM UG, where you can get ideas from other CRM users, and that can help to enhance your system as well. And there's also ample online resources as well for ongoing user engagement. All right, so I think that wraps up today's session. You know, we certainly want to thank you for attending, and we hope Melissa and I have given you some tips to make your next project very successful. And as a reminder, you know, here as you're going through analysis, design, and implementation, if you kind of focus on these bullet points, and again, going back to the top four, leadership, strong leadership, have a very solid plan. Always keep user adoption at the forefront of your decision making, and communicate throughout the organization through all stages. If you do these things, you're really going to set yourself up for success. All right, thank you all for attending, and have a great day.